Hi, and welcome to our very last webinar of the year. Um, I'll introduce myself. I am the Chief of Staff here at Coordinates and Harper, and today I'm going to boost through some slides to set the scene about this webinar today. And I'd like to introduce Eli Chadwick, our sales engineer, who is going to take us on a live demo of this new functionality. So if you have any questions, there is a Q&A pop-up at the bottom of your screen. Please jump in there and let us know what you're thinking. And if you have any super technical questions, I will take those to our team and follow up with you after, but we will answer what we can during the session. The other thing is we will record this webinar and send out the recording most likely in the new year, so watch out for that. Okay, so today this webinar is titled Multi-User GIS Editing with Distributed Version Control and Esri REST. So today we're really going to show you how you can have many people all editing the same data set. So thinking about multi-user editing, we're all already doing this using Word documents and track changes, or if you're a developer, you might be using GitHub and be familiar with the workflow through that. This all means that you can have one master data set and then share that layer with all your people if they're in different offices, different sites, or just contributors from all over the world, and have all those people editing that one layer at the same time using coordinates. So the version control part of this means that at any time you can roll back through the history and see all the changes that have ever been made and who made them. There's a bit of metadata about each one. This is really important for auditability and governance. You can see exactly how the data set has evolved, and if you need to roll back or want to roll back to a point in time, you can do that super easy. So here's an overview about how Coordinates works. You have all your data. We newly have 3D tiles available as well. So you might have your vector data, rasters, tables. You can load that into Coordinates, and then your end users can access it either through the portal site, which you may be familiar with. We have a desktop app, we have a QGIS plugin, and we have APIs so that you can stream data straight into other applications. Now, distributed version control. How this works is you have your data sitting in Coordinates. You can clone it down and you save it as a repository. And then depending if you're working in, say, ArcGIS Pro, QGIS, or FME, you're able to edit in your favorite packages, commit the changes to your local repo, and then you push it up back into Coordinates Cloud. So we're going to demo all this as part of this webinar today. I'm going to step through each step again just to, make it really clear, because I am saying the same thing like 4 times. So a site administrator currently publishes a layer, and you may be familiar with Coordinates where you can download this layer or stream it as API. What changes with the multi-user editor is now the contributors can clone that layer down and save it as a repo. The contributor edits it using their, like I showed you, ArcGIS Pro, QGIS, or FME, and they can then push their changes back into that master layer. You can do this with many contributors, all into the Coordinates site, and this is the real power of it, is that you don't need to have visibility of all these other people, and they can load into one layer. Then the publish layer is auto-updating with these, incorporating these edits, and that's overseen by your administrator seat, who will then publish the layer out, just like I showed you on that first slide. And again, the process repeats. Contributors can all pull changes down into their local repo. So I'm going to stop sharing there so Eli can actually take you on the demo and show you what that looks like in practice.
All right, so I'm going to start with a coordinates site. When you take out a plan with coordinates, you get one of these. It's a white label portal. This is where you publish your data to. It's where your end users will download stuff from. We've got a bunch of webinars that go into a lot of detail around how this works, but for those that aren't aware, you've got your map on the right, you've got your data sets on the left, you've got a bunch of filters down here. Filters show you the different data types that we support. As I say, if you want to learn more about that, we've got other webinars to check out. Each of these is a data set. So what I'm going to do is take you through the steps that Anne was just outlining. Little caveat, lots of live things happening, quite risky behavior, but hopefully we'll be okay. So the three buttons across the top are because I'm an admin seat. Map turns the map on and off. Data turns the data browser on and off. If you need to get into the configuration area, you hit the manage button. We've also got this little menu here, which has got a bunch of other options. So one of the first things that you'll need to do is set up your groups. The way it works in Koordinates is all permissions are assigned via these groups. So if I go into groups, I would say create group. I've actually already created one. So I've got this go-kart group, and in it I have added Anne and myself. So if you're setting up a similar situation, you would add all your users, use this button here, search for their name by email address, add them to the group. If you need to onboard a user, you can come in here, hit invite user, email address, assign them to the go-kart group, send the invite. They will get an email. They'll click the link, set up a password. They now have a Koordinates ID. When they come to the site, they can see any data that you've allocated to that group. That's just a quick overview of how that all works. So if I go back to manage, let's grab some data that we can then do some editing on. So first step here, I'm going to find the data set. I've got a sitemap. It's a geo package. I'm going to hit open. This is quite an important step. Each data set that you publish will have a group that owns it. These are the people members of the group that owns the data set have the ability to edit the data. They will need edit permissions, so which means that they would essentially be an admin seat. So I've created my group, go-karts, and now do the upload. This is a really small data set in the interests of having everything work in a timely fashion. It's basically what we're going to do here is we're building a go-kart track. I'm uploading a sitemap here. So that's come on up. I can drill down into my geo package, find the actual sitemap layer. It's polygon. So we hit import. I'm just going to keep all the defaults, keep it really simple. One thing to point out, the go-kart group are the owning group. It's quite a key thing to have set up correctly. If your data set has a primary key, it's a good idea to set that. Not important for what we're doing today. So let's go down and do the import. So now that data set is being copied from my machine, GeoPackage sitting in my downloads folder, up to the site. In theory, I don't have to hang around here. I can go away and that will just continue to load. So while that is loading up, I'm going to head on over to QGIS and just talk to a few things that need to be set up in here so we can do some editing. So the way that it works is you will need to set up a plugin. These are available under the plugins menu. If I go into manage and install plugins, it's sent it off to the wrong window. So in here, if I go to all and search for coordinates, comes up pretty quickly. So this is the plugin. I already have it installed. To install it yourself, you'll just simply go install plugin. It will ask you, do you have cart installed? Cart is the component that this is all running on top of. So another thing to point out is you don't have to be using QGIS. It's just really convenient because we've got this plugin. You could be using command line and do all the same things I'm doing. We also have an app which you can use if you were in a different environment. But I'm just going to run with the coordinates plugin. So I've got those already installed. If this wasn't visible, I can come up to plugins. I've got two plugins. I've got the cart repositories and I've got the coordinates show data browser. That's what this guy over here is. I also have my cart repositories open. I currently have no repositories stored locally. That's what I'm about to do. To do that, I'm going to jump in here. Let's go back up to the site and just make sure that that has finished loading. To do that, I can go to the front end and I can say, show me all of the recently added layers. And that layer has appeared. Let's have a quick look at what we've got there. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to filter by go-kart. So I'm only going to be seeing, I'm admin on the site. I can see all of the different layers that have been published. When your users come and say they're only members of go-kart, they will only see the layers that they have access to. So I've got a few layers here. Let's add a couple just to give some context. I've got a, that's a drone captured image. If I make my window bigger, I should find that that's loading up there. I'll change the draw order so we can see my. So this is the sitemap layer. This is the only feature in it at the moment. If I do a spatial query, it finds that I have got a existing car park, which is what this guy is. I'm going to add some layers to this, or some features. And to do that, I'm heading over to QGIS. So in QGIS, I can do stuff like, let's filter by my group. Again, if you're in a group that only has access to these data sets, this is all that you will see. From here, I'm going to grab a copy of this aerial imagery, just so I can work out where it is and what I'm doing. So this is the site that we're going to do some changes to. I'm also going to grab a copy of this sitemap. So this is the layer that I just published. I could go add, that is just adding it as a service in much the same way this is. It's a tiled service. Because we're going to operate on the data, I need to get a copy of it. So this is where the first bit of the cloning exercise comes in. I say get. Quite important, you need to find a place to put it. So I've got a folder called repos. I want to go in here. I'm going to make a new folder. I'll call it sitemap and I hit create. So that's where I want to put it. That is a folder. I can see my path here. Essentially, I hit OK. That's now cloning the sitemap repo down to my machine. That has arrived. Before I add it to the map, just for clarity, if we go into repos, this is that newly created folder. I have a sitemap geopackage. That's the default format that it comes down in. As Anne mentioned, you can change that to other formats. I'm not going to go into that today, but you could change it to SQL Server, a few other RDBMSs, MySQL. I'm just going to roll with the geopackage. Postgres also is another format you could use. So I've got my repo sitting here. I've now cloned it. If I look in my cart repositories, that keeps a track of all the things that I've cloned down. So these repos, you can throw them away and reclone them. You don't have to persist them. If you're working on something for a while, it's probably best to keep it there. You could reclone it every time. Really depends on how you want to operate. So this is the layer that I pushed up. If I drag that into my project and say, great, so one polygon, add that. So there I have my car park. What I'm going to do is throw this layer into edit mode, activate my polygon tool, and this being a go-kart track, we've decided that that is an excellent place to put a track. I can give it a name. I'll just call it track and hit OK. So what I've done here is I have now added this feature to my local data set. Nothing to do with the cloud so far. It's all sitting in my local, what we call a working copy. I now save it. So that's saved it into my working copy. The working copy is basically where the data lives. The repository is all of the commits that have been saved into the repo. So my next step is I need to save this commit and I want to put it into the repository. So I'm going to select commit working copy. Every time you make an audit, you're going to have to put a commit message in. This gives auditability. Who did what and when did they do it? So if I come in here, I'm going to say this particular change was added a track. And you'll see where that comes up later. So now my state is I have put some edits into my working copy. I've saved them to my repository. My next step is I want to get those up into the site. So to do that, I go to the repository here, right click, and I go down to push. So again, this is all built on top of Git. If you're familiar with Git, a lot of those, there's a whole lot more things you can do. I'm just going to keep it super simple. My remote, that is the repository that lives up on the Koordinates site. I'll talk a bit more about the architecture of how that all fits together once I've done my push. So now what's having a wee thing, and up here it says repo changes have been pushed to origin main. So they now live up on the site. So I'll head up there and just explain briefly what's going on. In fact, before I do that, if I open this and show me the log, this gives you a history of all the things that have happened. So I can see the first row here is one feature was added. That was the initial creation of the data set. I have come in and added a track. And then as Anne makes an edit, it will appear in my log. They've all been pushed up to the site. So everything going well. If I come up to the site and open up the layer, in here, info, this tells you all about the things that are in the data set. We've got other webinars that deal with that. The thing that I'm interested in here is the repository. So this gives you a view of all the changes that have been made to the data set. I can go and look at the different things that happen. So there's my existing car park. That's this guy here. And then I came along and I added my track. Just by way of explanation, when I published that layer in the first place, what we do is we have copied it into the data browser or the data catalog. We've also mirrored it off into one of these repositories. That mirrored repository is what I pulled down. When I pushed back to the mirrored repository. So for this data set, that repo is actually the data source for this site. If I go into manage, you'll notice that it is currently publishing. That's not, in fact, the initial publish. That is the system automatically grabbing whatever changes came up through what I had done, and they pushed it into the published layer. So there's sort of two levels of things going on. You've got your published layer, that's the one that people view here, they can download, and then in the background, you've got this repository that you're feeding data into. As I showed you up here in data, that repo has already been populated. And so while that publishing step operates here, that's essentially going to push my changes into that published layer. So now if I stop sharing and pass it back to Anne, she should be able to see the changes that I've made and add some herself.
Excellent. Thanks for that. So, while Eli was doing all that work, I cloned the sitemap. And how I did that was in QGIS here, I have my coordinates tab open. I'm in the horizon mapping site, so the site that Eli's just showed you, and I was able to find his sitemap layer here. So I hit get and I clone that down onto my local machine. And as you can see, it has cloned sitemap successfully, and I've added it to my map here. And you can see it's also included his changes. And this is my cart tab, so I'm able to, yeah, push and pull and commit from here. So I want to make a change as well. Now that Eli has added his track, I'd like to add a proposed office. So I'm just going to add a polygon in here, and we are going to call that office as the attribute, and that's saved. Hit save there. Righty, so once I've done that, I'm going to commit working copy changes for this data set to my local machine. So my commit message, because I want to communicate with the rest of my team and say, first office proposal, and hit OK. Then I am going to push it up to the cloud. So to do that, I just right click on my repo up here and hit push. There we go. And push it straight up to that main, that main version. And I can see that it has successfully been pushed to the origin. So at that point, I can hand back to Eli so he can show you what it looks like on the site itself.
Excellent. So if I go back to the site, there's a couple of things I want to do here as well. So I'm going to sort by recently updated. We can see that if I open up the card, I go into repository, I can see that Anne's change has been pushed up. So we've now got a timeline of sorts with commits in it. If I go into manage, I should find that Anne's changes are currently publishing. So there is a bit of a timing lag. It does do things sequentially. We do have ways of resolving conflicts, but essentially that needs to get republished. So while that is republishing, if I go back into here, filter by group, go into go-kart, open up the layer. What I'm going to do is jump onto the Services and APIs tab. I'm going to go down. These are all of the different services that are generated off the layer. So people can already pipe this into different things. If I had a style in here, we would have generated tiles as well. I want to grab this Esri REST feature service. I've already got a API key configured. You can come in here and create a new API key. If I grab a copy of that, and we go into ArcGIS Online, I'm going to create a new map viewer. Cool. What I want to do is add a layer from URL. And then it's simply paste in the URL that I copied. AGOL works out that it's an Esri REST service. I'm going to add that to my map. I now go into the place where I'm doing the things. Here. So that shows that Anne's change has already come through. This, for all intents and purposes, is just simply a AGOL web map. You could go off and do all of the good things, like be happy with that, save it, save and open. We'll call it so essentially there we've just created a really simple web map. So if I go back now to my contents, I've now got the sitemap sitting here. Now, if I head back over to the site, over here, it's probably still publishing. Looks like it's come through. So now I can see if I get rid of that layer, add it back in, I've already got some details here. So I've got, let's close my. So now having auto republished, it's picked up, we've got the existing car park. I've got my track here. If I do a spatial query, it'll go, that is a track. So if whatever that had been filled out by the editor, same deal down here. I've got an office has been added. And then really the last thing I wanted to show you was, if I go back into my QGIS project, I can't see the changes that Anne has made. You don't have to reclone it. My local copy, so this repo here, is pretty much hardwired into that repo that's up on the site that we're both doing our editing on. If I want to grab the changes that Anne has made, all I need to do is right click on here, and it's, whereas previously I did a push, now I'm going to do a pull. And I'm pulling from that exact same place. And so now what it's doing is it's going up to that repo that sits on the coordinate site. It says, are there any new changes here? Yes, great. Pull those down. So my local data set is now fully synced with that that's up in the cloud. That means I can come in here and do some more changes. So I could come in here and go, right, let's do some more things. Let's extend the car park, because we're going to have a whole bunch of people come in here. And I'll call this the new car park. Great. So now I've got a new thing in here. Again, just to go over the final steps, I'm going to save it. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to commit my working copy changes. I'm going to say, edit a new car park. So that's all been added. And then it's basically come in here and say, push. Same story again, pushing my changes up. So you could have 50 different editors doing this all over the place. We've got a bunch of additions coming to this functionality. There's going to be, we're looking at doing pull requests so that you can wrap your changes in a branch, send it up to the site, and then your administrator will say, do an evaluation, look at the changes that you've made, make sure they're geographically in the right places before they merge that in. That's roadmap stuff. Right now you can hammer away with multi-editor on one layer. Another couple of things in here. If I now go into my show log, I can click on that. I can now see we're building up a history of all the things that have happened. I can go and look at one of the changes and I can say, show me the changes introduced by this commit. That should open another window that says, all right, so this particular commit contains, it's got a primary key, it's a type of office, it's a polygon. I can even look at the geometry. You can swipe this and look at the old and the new. So you can look at different versions of the data set. This is where the version controlling comes in. There are many other things you can do in here, but I'll just leave it at that. And then the final thing to do is to head back on up to the site. Let's kill that guy off. I'll go into data. This is the layer that I've been working on. It's probably still publishing, but if I come into the data card for it and look at repository, I've now got a fully auditable history of all of the changes that have happened. So had I been, so my car park has arrived, that will almost certainly be still publishing. Once it has published, it will update into the layer itself. So there's my new car park. Looks pretty close to being done. Great, so that is done. Now if I head, there's a few ways you can get there. I can say view in the portal. It sends me up to the layer itself. Now you can see that we've got the car park. So that republishes automatically happened. If there were more edits coming in, flowing in at the same time, it would just be constantly republishing itself. And then finally, if I jump back over to my Esri site, open up my web map, there's a bit of a timing lag here, but hopefully when I open it in a new map viewer, awesome. So now I've got my new car park has arrived, fully queryable. Look, it's a new car park. So I've got all of the things have come in here. I guess just to conclude, what we've done here is we've loaded a data set up. We've given people permissions to be able to edit it. They are doing edits constantly. It is automatically publishing. And if you wanted to be using Koordinates as your one truth of source, where your data sets all lived, you can then be piping that off into your AGOL environment. That way your Esri users can have a look in. You can also share this web map with people and they can just look at the data constantly updating. And then from here, you can do all the usual Koordinates things like, okay, I want a copy of this data set, do an export. When you do an export, you can pull it out in a much different format. So Esri shapefiles, FileGeo databases, CSVs, map infos, KML for Google Earth, DWG. So your CAD users can be pulling the latest version of the data, works well in that whole sort of digital twin space, or just get a good old PDF. So that all worked, which is great news. And I, at this point, will pass it back to Anne.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that, Eli. That was really interesting. And it's really amazing how the repo changes are pretty quick. Like when I make a change, when you make a change, it's in that repo almost instantly. It might take a little while to publish because there's a whole bunch of processes been added to it, but that actual dynamic changing of the multi-users is very fast. Yeah. So thank you for everybody joining us today. We really appreciate your time. This will be recorded. I will send out a link to you all in the new year. If you are interested in how this workflow could work for your business, please do reach out and we can line up a live demo. Also, we are on LinkedIn and YouTube. So if you would like to learn more or follow our updates, we do post a lot out through those channels. Otherwise, have a wonderful holiday break and we hope to catch you all in the new year.